Hi again then guys, and so we've got another Gran Turismo 6 Special Projects build for you today. And this time it's a little bit different, because usually these are of course replica builds, but this one is not strictly speaking a replica. It is however inspired by a classic racing Porsche. Now the base car that we're using is of course the RUF BTR, and the vehicle that it's inspired by is the 1974 Porsche 911 RSR 2.1 litre turbo that raced in the 1974 Le Mans. Extremely quick vehicle, and it actually finished in 4th place, which doesn't sound that great, but considering the opposition that it was up against from pretty much the prototypes of the time, including from companies like Matra, it actually did really well to finish so high. So, first of all, as always, I'll show you what I've done to get the visual look of the car. Then we'll go to the garage for the mechanical setup, and finally out to the track to see how it performs. So visually, of course, this car is not a premium model, it's a standard car. So for the visuals, it's actually a relatively simple setup, plus the car that it's inspired by was also silver, so it's a relatively easy colour to get a hold of. Obviously there are no modifiable bodywork for this car apart from the rear wing. For the rear wing, the 1974 car that it's a homage to does have a very large rear wing, so we've gone for the custom wing. We've gone for the Type C wing supports, basically just because they blend into the existing ducktail. The Type B wing itself, which has a small dip in the middle, as you can see from the side view, and the Type A winglets. As far as width, you want that as high as possible, and for height, we've actually got it as low as possible, because that's actually fairly visually accurate actually to the real car's wing, even though obviously it was a different model 911. For the rims, we've gone for, I believe it's the standard size, but it may be the larger rims, I can't remember. Yeah, the standard size, and it's these PDI P525N rims, which look kind of like Steelies. Again, very similar to the 74 Porsche's rims. Obviously, you cannot fit additional meters because it's not a premium model. As far as the paint, of course it is silver, but the particular silver in question is crystal lauret silver, which actually comes from the Mercedes SLR McLaren. For the rims, you can just leave those black, they're already black. And for the brakes, we've gone for black as well. And they are phantom black, but black is black really. So that particular black comes from the Chaparral Vision GT car, but you don't really need it. It doesn't really look that much different to the other blacks that are in the selection. So that's it for the visual look of the car. As I said, relatively simple to retain. So now let's go over to the garage for the more important thing, which is the mechanical setup of the car. Now, as I said in the outset of the video, we cannot make this exactly accurate to the real car for a couple of reasons. For one thing, it's not the same generation 911. It's also no way near as light as the actual RSR race car, which weighed about 820 kilos. It also obviously doesn't even have the same type of engine. That car is a 2.1 turbo, whereas this is a 3.4. But it's more inspired by that car rather than a replica of it. More of an homage, really. So you want your racing soft tyres. For suspension, we've got the ride height on 70, front and rear. Springs we've increased to 6 on the front, 4 on the back. Springs we've increased to 1075 and 1275. Dampers to 5. Anti-roll on 7. Camber on 3 with neutral toe as ever. For the gearbox, we've got an auto setting of 205. Then we've rounded off the gears to 2900, 1950, 1415, 1075, 860 and 720 with a final drive of 3.6. For the diff, we've got the lowest initial torque, highest acceleration and lowest braking sensitivity. As far as power, we do have an oil change, so bear that in mind. And as far as power, you've got a couple of options. Now, I've gone for 500 horsepower and 540 pp. Now, the real car has about 500 horsepower as well, so it's actually accurate in that way. But as you can see, I've done what may seem to be a bit pointless. I've fitted all these parts, but then I've reduced it right down to 69.6%. So why not just not fit these parts and have the limiter higher? Well, there's actually 3 reasons. One, if you fit all of the parts and then restrict it, you actually end up with more torque than if you didn't do that. Check it out for yourself, it's funny how that works. You also end up with a higher PP for the power, and most importantly in this regard, you also end up, especially with the engine tune, with a higher redline, which is important when you're making a racing-based semi-replica vehicle, because obviously racing cars have a higher redline, so I wanted this car to mirror that. But as I said, you don't have to follow this exactly, that's just what I've gone for those 3 reasons. As far as weight, well, as we said, the real car weighs 820 kilos, and this car is nowhere near that. So instead, we've just completely changed it up to make it PP, competitive, and also, rather than trying to make it as accurate as the real car, let's just make it as good handling as possible. So as far as downforce, unfortunately, we can only go up to 20, which is a shame. I would have liked more. You want the full weight loss package, and then we've got a 195 kilo ballast, which we've put all the way to the front, which actually gives you a perfect 50-50 weight split. So as you can see, it's a relatively simple setup for the car, really. So let's go to the track and see if it performs well. So for overall specs, obviously it's not completely accurate to the real car, but visually it's not that far off, and performance-wise it's actually a very good track-going 911 variant. Now, performance-wise, this is the old-style Lasarte track that does not have the chicanes, and this car can actually get around this track in less than 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and that's without cutting any corners. That's a clean lap. So for 540 pp, pretty quick, especially for a vehicle that has no way near its full power. Incidentally, as far as power goes, even with 500 horses, this car can do about 212, 213 miles per hour on the Lasarte straight. So again, for its power and for its PP, very respectable performance. As you'd expect from a 911, the acceleration is very good, and I have to say, mainly thanks to the ballast, the handling is actually surprisingly good. The 911s are generally known for having quite flighty front ends because of not being grounded by weight that you would usually have there, but in this case, because of the ballast, it handles really, really well. Possibly the best handling 911 variant in the game, I would say. But of course I would be biased in that regard. So for those of you who do decide to use this tune, I hope you find it enjoyable, and I would appreciate feedback on, if you do use it for racing, whether you find it competitive or not. As far as competitiveness, obviously I don't expect it to beat everything at the 540 pp level, and it is more of a kind of a vintage racing tune rather than to take on the modern stuff. But I think it should still be quite a competitive car overall. So I hope you guys find this tune setup enjoyable and competitive, and that's it for this build. So I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.